3 months after the humans left, Ambassador Linda Hayes walked into the council chamber. She was not alone. Admiral Scott Parker walked on her right, representing Earth's military. Chief Engineer Gregory Lane walked on her left, representing the technical expertise that the council so desperately needed. Behind them came a delegation of 50 humans, engineers, doctors, teachers, negotiators, the people who had kept the council's civilization running for 3 decades. The council members stood as they entered. It was a gesture of respect they had never offered before. Some of them looked relieved. Some looked ashamed. Councillor Thexler just looked tired. Linda took her position at the center of the chamber, the same spot where she had stood 3 months ago to ask for Earth's representation. The same spot where she had been rejected. She did not smile. She did not show anger. She simply stood there with quiet confidence. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began. "3 months ago I stood in this chamber and made a simple request. I asked that humanity be given a voice in the decisions that affect our people and our future. You denied that request. You said we were too young, too inexperienced, too unproven." The chamber was silent. "Nobody interrupted, so we left," Linda continued. "We did not sabotage anything. We did not destroy anything. We simply stopped doing the work you had taken for granted. And now you see what that work was worth." Councillor Vreck stepped forward. Her crystalline body had regained some of its brightness, but she still looked diminished. "Ambassador Hayes, we acknowledge our error. We failed to recognize humanity's contributions to this council. We failed to value your people appropriately." She gestured to the assembly. "We offer you not just a seat on the council, but a position on the executive committee. Full voting rights, full access to all council resources and decision-making processes. We offer you everything you asked for and more." Linda shook her head slowly. "You misunderstand our position, Counselor. We did not leave to extort concessions. We did not abandon our posts to force you to give us what we wanted. We left because you could not see us as equals, and now you do see us, but only because you need us." The words hung in the air like an accusation. "However," Linda said after a long pause, "humanity has no interest in watching galactic civilization collapse. Despite how you treated us, we do not want to see people suffer. We do not want to see stations fail and ships lost and lives endangered. So we will return." Relief flooded through the chamber, but Linda held up her hand. "We will return on our terms. The rules have changed." She transmitted a document to every council member simultaneously. They opened it and began reading. As they read, expressions ranged from surprise to understanding to reluctant acceptance. "We want the council seat you offered," Linda said, "but that is just the beginning. We want fair compensation for our people. Real pay that reflects the value of their work, not the minimum you thought you could get away with." She looked at Gregory Lane. Chief Engineer Lane maintained the Nexus Gate network for 25 years. He prevented a collapse that would have fragmented the entire council. He was paid the same as a basic technician. "That ends now," Gregory spoke for the first time. His voice was rough from years of arguing with bureaucrats. "I told you for 2 decades that we needed proper funding for gate research. You always said no. Now the gates are failing and you finally understand that maybe I knew what I was talking about. We want recognition," Linda continued, "that maintenance, logistics, and infrastructure are not lesser work. They are the foundation of everything you take for granted. The people who keep your stations running, your ships flying, your communications working, they deserve the same respect as your warriors and diplomats." Ambassador Gorath nodded slowly. The Krell understood respect through strength. Now he was learning to respect strength that came from knowledge and skill rather than weapons. "We want a formal agreement," Linda said, her voice growing stronger. "That no species will be dismissed or devalued simply because they lack military power or ancient lineage. Every species that contributes to this council deserves a voice. Every worker who keeps this civilization functioning deserves respect." Admiral Scott Parker stepped forward. He was younger than Linda, but he carried himself with absolute authority. "And we want one more thing. Earth is establishing an independent engineering guild. Any species can join, but humans will lead it. We will maintain critical systems across the galaxy, but we will do so as equals, not servants. This guild will have its own authority," Scott continued, "its own standards, its own training programs. When a guild engineer tells you a system needs maintenance, you will listen. When they say something is unsafe, you will stop. No more ignoring warnings because they come from someone you consider beneath you. Thexelar looked like he wanted to object. His pride was wounded. His people had been the dominant force in council engineering for centuries. Now humans were demanding to lead, but Counselor Ixara spoke before he could. These terms are more than fair, Admiral Parker. They are what should have been offered 30 years ago. The council accepts. She looked around the chamber, daring anyone to disagree. Nobody did. They had seen what happened when humans left. None of them wanted to see it again. Then we have an agreement, Linda said. She allowed herself a small smile. Our ships will begin returning to their stations immediately. We will restore the systems we maintained. But understand this. We are not rescuing you. We are resuming a partnership that should have been equal from the beginning. Over the next few days, human ships began appearing across council space. Engineers like Danny Cole returned to their stations, but everything was different now. They were not just workers anymore. They were recognized experts, respected professionals. Danny walked through the Velen Trade Hub with his new assistant, a young Velen engineer named Crix. He was teaching Crix everything he knew about the station. All the small adjustments, all the regular maintenance, all the things he had been doing alone for 8 years. Why did nobody teach us this before? Crix asked in frustration as Danny showed him how to recalibrate a power coupling. Because nobody asked, Danny said, and because we were too busy doing the work to stop and train others. That changes now. The new contract requires us to train local engineers, to share our knowledge, so when we leave someday you will be able to keep things running. You plan to leave again? Maybe, someday. But if we do, it will be because our work here is done. Because we taught you everything we know, not because you made us feel unwanted. On the medical station where 30 people had died, human medic Lisa had returned, but she had brought 5 students with her, species from across the council who wanted to learn human medical techniques. She taught them about the quarantine fields, about the constant monitoring required, about how to read the small signs that something was going wrong before it became a crisis. Medicine is not just about treatment, she told her students. It is about prevention, about catching problems early, about being observant and careful every single day. One student asked, "Is this how all humans work? Always watching? Always maintaining?" Lisa smiled. Not all humans, but many of us. We learned a long time ago that small problems become big problems if you ignore them. Better to fix things while they are still small. At the Nexus gates, Gregory Lane was leading the largest training program in council history. 300 engineers from 60 different species had come to learn about gate maintenance. It would take years to teach them everything, but it was necessary. The gates are not machines, Gregory explained to his class. They are living networks of energy and matter. They respond to attention, to care, to intuition as much as calculation. You cannot maintain them by following a manual. You have to feel them. Understand them. A Quillix engineer raised her manipulator arm. But how do we learn to feel them? Time, experience, and willingness to admit when you do not understand something. Gregory smiled. That last part is the hardest for most species. Humans learned early that we did not know everything. That made us better at learning. Back on Earth, Ambassador Linda Hayes sat in her office reading reports from across the galaxy. The Nexus gates were stabilizing. The trade routes were clearing. The stations were running smoothly again. Everything was being fixed. But more importantly, everything was being taught. The knowledge that humans had accumulated over 30 years was being shared openly. A message arrived from Counselor Vrex. Linda opened it. "Thank you, Ambassador, for teaching us humility, for showing us the value of work we had overlooked, for giving us a second chance." Linda thought about her response for a long time. Finally, she typed, "We did not teach you anything, Counselor. We simply stopped carrying weight you did not know we held. The lesson was yours to learn. We just gave you the opportunity." She sent the message and looked out at the stars. Humanity had not won through violence or cunning. They had not conquered anyone or destroyed anything. They had simply walked away and let the galaxy feel their absence. Sometimes the quietest action made the loudest statement. And the Council would never forget it. 6 months had passed since humanity returned to Council space. The changes were visible everywhere, not just in the repaired systems and restored services, but in the way people worked together. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Horizon's End, now officially designated as the flagship of the Independent Engineering Guild. He watched as 3 different species worked together to repair a damaged station near the outer rim. Humans. Velan and Quillix engineers coordinated their efforts seamlessly. It had not been easy to get to this point. There had been resistance, resentment, and plenty of mistakes along the way. But slowly the galaxy was learning a new way of working. "Captain, we are receiving a priority call from the Council," his communications officer reported. "It is Counselor Thexler." Jake smiled slightly. Thexler had been humanity's biggest opponent. Now he called regularly for advice and assistance. People could change when they had to. Put him through. Thexlar's face appeared on the screen. He looked better than he had 6 months ago. Less tired, less afraid, but also more humble. "Captain Morrison, we have a situation at Station Kepler 7. One of the primary environmental processors is showing unusual readings. Our engineers are not sure if it is serious." "What does the guild representative say?" Jake asked. Every major station now had a guild representative with the authority to make decisions about maintenance and safety. "She says we should shut down the processor immediately and do a full inspection, but that will cause significant inconvenience." I wanted a second opinion. Jake kept his voice neutral. "Counselor, do you remember what happened the last time you ignored a human engineer's safety warning?" Thexler was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. "The medical station. 30 dead. The guild representative is trained to spot problems before they become disasters. If she says shut it down, you shut it down. That is what you pay us for. That is what you agreed to." "You are right, of course. I will give the order immediately." "Thank you, Captain." The call ended. Jake's first officer, Carrie Brooks, shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, he would never have called for advice. He would have just overruled the engineer and hoped for the best. 6 months ago, he did not understand that hope is not a maintenance strategy, Jake said. Now he does. That is progress. On Station Unity 9, Director Gentok was hosting a ceremony. The station was unveiling a memorial wall, listing all the humans who had worked there over the past 30 years. It was Gentok's idea. He wanted to acknowledge what had been overlooked for so long. Chief Engineer Vorn stood beside him as they revealed the wall. Hundreds of names were carved into the metal, along with brief descriptions of their contributions. Danny Cole maintained primary power systems for 8 years, prevented 14 major failures through proactive maintenance. Lisa Brennan, medical specialist, saved countless lives through vigilant monitoring and rapid response. Peter Grant, safety systems expert, identified and corrected vulnerabilities across multiple stations. The list went on and on, name after name, human after human who had worked in obscurity, asking for nothing but a fair chance. Vorn had tears in her eye stalks as she read the names. "I worked alongside some of these people for years. I never knew how much they were doing. I never asked. None of us did," Gentok said quietly. "We saw them as assistants, helpers, people who did what we told them to do. We never realized they were the ones keeping everything running." A human engineer named Carl stood in the crowd, watching the ceremony. He had worked on Station Unity 9 for 5 years before the recall. Now he was back as a senior guild instructor, training the next generation of engineers. A young Lumini student approached him nervously. "Instructor Carl, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you come back? After how you were treated, why did you agree to help us?" Carl thought about his answer carefully. "Because holding grudges does not fix anything. Because people needed help. And because we believed that you could learn, that you could change. We were right." The student nodded slowly. "We are grateful. Many of us are ashamed of how humans were treated before. Do not be ashamed," Carl said. "Be better. Learn from the mistake and do not repeat it. That is all anyone can ask." Across the galaxy, similar changes were happening. The Independent Engineering Guild had opened training centers on 20 different worlds. Students from every council species were learning human maintenance techniques, human safety protocols, human approaches to problem solving. But they were also teaching the humans. Velan engineering philosophy, Quillix mathematical approaches, Krell structural design. The knowledge was flowing both ways now, creating something new and better than what either side had alone. Ambassador Linda Hayes sat in the Council Executive Committee meeting, listening to a debate about resource allocation. As Earth's representative, she now had an equal vote on all major decisions. It still felt strange sometimes after so many years of being dismissed. The debate was about funding for outlying colonies. Some council members wanted to cut support to save money. Linda listened to both sides, then spoke up. I have reviewed the proposal and I have concerns. The colonies in question include several agricultural worlds that supply food to the core systems. Cutting their support might save money in the short term, but it risks long-term food security. Councillor Ixara nodded thoughtfully. The ambassador makes a good point. We should consider the full implications. The discussion continued, but the proposal was eventually rejected. After the meeting, Thexelar approached Linda. You voted against your own financial interests today, he noted. Earth would have benefited from the cost savings. Earth benefits more from a stable council, Linda replied. We learned a long time ago that short-term thinking creates long-term problems. Sometimes spending money now prevents spending much more later. Thexelar smiled slightly. You are teaching us to think differently, to value maintenance over glory, prevention over reaction. It is not easy for us. It was not easy for us either, Linda said. We had to learn these lessons through hard experience, through disasters and failures. You are lucky. You get to learn from our mistakes instead of making your own. That is generous of you, to share your hard-won knowledge so freely. Linda shrugged. Knowledge grows when it is shared. If we hoard what we know, we all stay ignorant. If we teach what we learn, we all become smarter. On Earth, Danny Cole sat in his garden with his wife Karen. They were watching the sunset over the Mars colony where they lived. His communication device buzzed with another message from his former Velon supervisor, now his colleague at the guild. They want to name a training program after you, Karen said, reading over his shoulder. That is embarrassing, Danny muttered. That is recognition, Karen corrected, for 8 years of work that nobody appreciated at the time. Let them honor you, Danny sighed. I just did my job. That is all any of us did. Yes, but you did it so well that nobody noticed it was being done. That takes real skill. That deserves recognition. Gregory Lane was getting similar recognition. The council had created the Lane Prize for Engineering Excellence, awarded annually to someone who showed extraordinary dedication to maintaining and improving critical systems. Gregory had protested but eventually accepted it. At the award ceremony, he gave a short speech. This prize should not be named after me. It should be named after every human who worked quietly to keep things running, every engineer who stayed late to fix a problem, every technician who noticed something wrong before it became a disaster, every maintenance worker who took pride in their work even when nobody was watching. He paused, looking out at the audience. We did not do what we did for recognition. We did it because it needed to be done. Because we cared about doing good work. That should be the standard, not the exception. The applause was long and genuine. The council was finally understanding what humanity had been trying to show them all along. 1 year after humanity's return, Captain Jake Morrison stood once again on the bridge of the horizon's end. But this time he was not looking at a council station. He was looking at a new human-led facility near the Outer Rim, the Independent Engineering Guild's headquarters. The building was enormous, home to thousands of students and instructors from across the galaxy. It had training centers, research laboratories, living quarters, and recreation areas. It was a symbol of what had been achieved through cooperation and mutual respect. Carrie Brooks stood beside him, now promoted to executive officer. Hard to believe it has only been a year. So much has changed. Everything has changed, Jake agreed, and nothing has changed. We are still doing the same work. Fixing things, maintaining systems, teaching others. We are just doing it as equals now instead of servants. Do you think it will last? Jake smiled. Yes, because they finally understand. Not just that they need us, but why they need us. They understand the value of quiet competence, of daily dedication, of small actions repeated consistently over time. Once you truly understand that, you do not forget it. He looked at the stars beyond the station. We taught them the most important lesson. That civilization is not built on grand gestures or dramatic victories. It is built on the work of ordinary people doing extraordinary things day after day without expecting applause. And now, 3 weeks had passed since the humans left. Council Operations Director Gentok stood in the central command room of Station Unity 9, staring at his screens with growing frustration. Something was wrong. Many things were wrong, actually, and he could not understand why. The life support system kept switching to emergency mode, It happened every 2 days, like clockwork. The quantum communication array kept losing data. Messages were arriving incomplete or not arriving at all. The gravity generators were fluctuating by small amounts, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to be annoying. Small problems. Fixable problems. Or so Gentok thought. He called for his best engineer, a four-armed Quillix named Vorn. She had been trained at the finest technical academy in the sector. She should be able to fix these simple issues. Vorn arrived quickly, her eye stalks drooping with tiredness. She had been working for 3 days straight trying to solve the problems. Report, Gentok demanded. Director, I cannot access the main control systems, Vorn said. The humans who maintained these systems never gave us the master codes. I have tried to bypass the security, but the encryption is very complex. Much more complex than it should be. Gentok felt his back plates tighten with anger. Then break through it. You are a trained engineer. Sir, we have been trying. The problem is that everything the humans built looks simple on the surface. But when we look deeper, we find layers and layers of complexity. They made it seem easy, but it was not easy at all. Gentok did not want to hear excuses. Work faster. The council is asking questions. Vorn left to continue her work, but she did not feel hopeful. She had studied human engineering before, and she was starting to realize something. Humans did not just build things to work. They built things to work perfectly in any situation under any stress, and that required constant attention and adjustment. Attention that was no longer being given. Across the galaxy, other stations and facilities were experiencing similar problems. On the agricultural station above Telon 4, the climate control system stopped working properly. The temperature in the growing zone started to swing up and down. Not by much, but enough to stress the plants. The station director called for engineers. They arrived and looked at the system. Everything appeared to be working correctly. All the parts were functioning. All the connections were solid. But somehow the output was wrong. We need the humans who built this, one engineer finally admitted. They understood something we do not. On Credix Prime, a mining operation ground to a halt when the automated drilling systems locked themselves down. The computers said there was a safety violation, but nobody could find what was wrong. All the safety sensors showed green. All the systems were within normal parameters, but the machines would not start. The mining supervisor spent 6 hours reading through the system logs before he found a note buried in the code. It was written by a human technician named Peter Grant. The note explained that the safety system required manual verification every 30 days because of unusual radiation from the planet's core. Peter had been doing that verification for 3 years. Nobody else had known it was necessary. Now Peter was gone and the 30-day deadline had passed. The supervisor managed to override the lockdown, but he had no idea if it was safe to do so. He just knew the company was losing money with every hour the machine sat idle. Counselor Thexlar was having his own problems. His personal shuttle refused to respond to his commands. The ship was in perfect condition. Every system checked out fine. But when he gave the command to start the engines, nothing happened. He called his personal mechanic. The mechanic spent 2 hours checking everything before finally giving up. Sir, I believe the ship is locked to the biometric signature of the previous maintenance chief, the mechanic said carefully. Then override it, Thexler snapped. I cannot. The human who set up the security system made it very difficult to bypass. It would be easier to buy a new shuttle than to break this code. Thexlar was furious. He had meetings to attend, appearances to make. And now he was stuck because some human technician had locked him out of his own ship. The council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 73 species gathered in the Great Chamber to discuss the growing crisis. We must contact Earth, said Council Member Vrex. Her crystalline body was dimmer than usual, showing her stress. We must ask them to return. They insulted us by leaving without explanation, Thexler argued. We should not reward such behavior. Perhaps we insulted them first, said Ambassador Gorath of the Krell. The huge warrior looked uncomfortable saying it. The Krell did not usually admit mistakes. They asked for representation. We denied them, they left. It is logical. They were workers, Thexlar said. Important workers, yes, but still workers. They do not deserve a council seat. Then perhaps we do not deserve their work, Vrex said quietly. The argument went on for hours. Meanwhile, the problems continued to grow. The navigation beacons along the primary trade routes started giving incorrect readings. Ships began getting lost. Not dramatically lost, just a few light years off course here and there. But in space, a few light years could mean days of extra travel time. Insurance companies started raising their rates. Shipping companies started losing money. Trade began to slow down. On Earth, Danny Cole sat in his apartment on Mars watching the news feeds from Council Space. His wife Karen brought him coffee and sat down beside him. "They still do not understand," Danny said, shaking his head. "What do they think is happening?" Karen asked. "They think things are breaking down because humans sabotaged them before leaving. They cannot imagine that we were just maintaining them normally every single day, and now nobody is doing that maintenance." Karen sipped her coffee. "How long before they figure it out?" "Months, maybe. They are looking for big problems, dramatic failures. They are not seeing all the small things that are going wrong, the little adjustments that are not being made, the minor issues that are not being caught before they become major issues." Danny had spent 8 years maintaining the Velen trade hub. He knew that station better than he knew his own home. He knew which power coupling needed to be checked every week. He knew which cooling system liked to drift off temperature. He knew which computer terminal had a sticky connection that needed to be cleaned regularly. He knew 1,000 small things that kept the station running perfectly, and now nobody was doing those small things. Back in Council Space, more problems emerged. A medical station's quarantine field flickered and failed. 30 patients died before emergency crews could evacuate everyone. The investigation showed that the field generator needed constant recalibration to account for radiation from the nearby star. A human medic named Lisa had been doing that recalibration every 16 hours for 4 years. She had never written it down. She had never told anyone. She just did it because it needed to be done. Now Lisa was on Earth working at a hospital in California, and people were dead because her knowledge was gone. The Council's trade coordinator sent a formal request to Earth, asking for a meeting. The message was polite and professional. It acknowledged that there seemed to be some misunderstanding that needed to be resolved. Ambassador Linda Hayes received the message in her office. She read it carefully, then deleted it without responding. The trade coordinator sent another message. Still no response. He sent a third message, marked urgent. Still nothing. "Why will they not talk to us?" he asked his assistant in frustration. His assistant, a young Lumini, spoke carefully. "Perhaps they feel they have already said everything they needed to say." And we did not listen. The coordinator did not like that answer, but he could not argue with it. More weeks passed. The problems grew worse. Power fluctuations became common across multiple stations. Communication delays increased. Food shipments were getting lost. Medical supplies were arriving late. Nothing was catastrophic yet. But everything was degraded. The smooth, efficient machine that was the Council's civilization was becoming rough and unreliable. And slowly, very slowly, some Council members began to understand. The humans had not been attacking them. The humans had been holding everything together. And now that the glue was gone, things were starting to fall apart. 2 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council faced a crisis unlike anything they had experienced before. It was not a war. It was not an invasion. It was something far harder to fight. Everything was breaking down slowly but surely. Chief Engineer Vorn submitted her report to Director Gentok with trembling hands. She had spent weeks analyzing human construction methods, trying to understand what made their work different. What she discovered frightened her. "Sir, the humans did not just build things to specification," she explained. "They built adaptive systems. Systems that could handle changes in radiation, temperature, pressure, and a dozen other factors. But these systems need constant small adjustments to work properly. The humans were making these adjustments every single day, so smoothly that nobody noticed." Gentok stared at her. "You are saying we need humans to maintain human-built systems?" "No, sir, I am saying we need humans to maintain almost everything." They did not just work on their own projects. They helped with everyone's projects. They improved things. They fixed problems before those problems became visible. They made everything better quietly without taking credit. Gentok sat down heavily. He was beginning to understand the scope of the disaster. The medical station disaster was still fresh in everyone's mind. 30 dead because one human medic was no longer there to adjust a field generator. The investigation had revealed something shocking. That human medic, Lisa Brennan, had not been assigned to maintain the quarantine fields. She had just noticed they needed attention and started doing it on her own time. Nobody had asked her to. Nobody had thanked her. She just did it because people's lives depended on it. Now she was gone and people were dead. Similar stories were emerging from across the galaxy. Human workers who had gone far beyond their assigned duties, who had fixed things that were not their responsibility, who had prevented disasters that nobody else had even noticed were possible. And now all of them were gone. The Council's main trade routes were in chaos. The navigation beacons were drifting out of alignment. Ships were getting lost regularly now. 3 cargo vessels had disappeared completely, presumed lost in uncharted space. Insurance companies were refusing to cover certain routes at any price. The economy was beginning to contract. Businesses were closing. People were losing jobs. And it had only been 2 months. Councillor Thexlar stood before the full council assembly, looking older and more tired than anyone had ever seen him. His confidence was gone, replaced by fear and confusion. "We must contact Earth immediately," he said. "We must negotiate their return." "I have sent 47 diplomatic requests," Vreck said quietly. "Every single one has been ignored. They receive our messages. We know they do, but they do not respond." "Then we send a fleet," suggested a militant council member. "We demand they return." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that was a terrible idea. Earth had a small but advanced military. More importantly, Earth had allies. The Krell and Vaxxon, who had been enemies for centuries before humans brought them together, had both expressed support for humanity's position. A war with Earth would tear the Council apart. "We cannot force them," Ambassador Gorath said. His massive frame seemed diminished somehow. "And even if we could, you cannot force someone to do good work. They would return and do the minimum required. It would not solve our problems." On Earth, former Station Chief Danny Cole was working in his garden when he received a call from his old supervisor, not his human supervisor, his Velen supervisor from the trade hub. Danny almost declined the call. "But curiosity won," he answered. The Velen's face appeared on his screen. He looked desperate. "Danny, please, we need your help. The station is falling apart. Systems are failing that we did not even know needed maintenance. We have tried to fix them, but we do not have your knowledge." Danny felt a flash of sympathy. He had worked with this Velon for years. The man had always been fair to him, even friendly. But Danny remembered his orders. "I am sorry. I cannot help you, but why not? What did we do wrong?" "You did not value us," Danny said simply. "For 30 years, humans worked hard to help build something great. We asked for one thing in return, a real voice in the decisions that affected us. You said no. We made a mistake," the Velen said. "We see that now. Please come back. We will pay you more, give you better conditions." "It was never about money," Danny said. "It was about respect." He ended the call. His wife Karen came outside. "Was that your old boss?" "Yes, he wants me to come back." "What did you tell him?" "I told him no." Danny looked at his hands. They were dirty from gardening. He liked this work. It was simple and honest. Let them fix their own problems for a while. Maybe they will learn something. Back in Council space, the Nexus Gate network was failing. This was the biggest disaster yet. The Nexus Gates were ancient technology, built by the Forerunners millions of years ago. They allowed instant travel between star systems. They were the backbone of galactic civilization. Nobody fully understood how they worked. But humans had been maintaining them for 25 years. A man named Gregory Lane had led a team of 40 specialists who kept the impossible machinery functioning through intuition, experimentation, and sheer determination. Now Gregory was on Earth, and the gates were dying. Chief Engineer Gregory Lane sat in his home in Colorado, reading the technical reports that kept arriving from Council space. He could see exactly what was going wrong. He could fix it easily. A few adjustments here, a recalibration there, nothing complicated for someone who understood the systems. But he did not move. He had his orders, and more importantly, he had his pride. For 25 years he had begged the Council to fund proper research into the Nexus Gates. He had warned them that relying on human intuition was dangerous. He had proposed training programs to teach other species what humans had learned. The Council had always said no. Too expensive, not a priority. The gates were working fine, so why worry? Now they were paying the price for that short-sighted thinking. Ambassador Gorath's report to the Council was grim. We have lost contact with the Outer Rim territories. 17 colony worlds are cut off. The nexus gates connecting them to the core worlds are no longer functioning. Our engineers estimate complete network collapse within 6 months. The chamber erupted in panic. The nexus gate network was everything. Without it, the Council's territory would fragment into isolated systems. Trade would collapse. Defense would be impossible. Civilization itself would be threatened. Counselor Ixara of the Lumini finally spoke. Her species was ancient and wise, rarely involving themselves in council politics. But even they could not ignore this crisis. We have been fools, she said simply. We thought humans were ordinary because they did not boast of their achievements, because they worked quietly and efficiently, because they made difficult things look easy. But that was never ordinariness. That was mastery. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Humans have a saying, "You do not know what you have until it is gone." We have learned this lesson in the hardest way possible. Thexler, who had been one of humanity's strongest opponents, finally broke. What do we do? How do we fix this? We cannot fix it, Ixara said. Only the humans can. We must give them what they asked for. Not because we want to, not even because it is right, but because we have no choice, the Council voted. For the first time in its history, the vote was unanimous. Earth would be offered a full seat on the Council. Full voting rights, full representation, and they would beg the humans to come back. Thexlar personally composed the message. He tried to keep his dignity while basically writing a plea for help. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. The message was sent to Earth with full diplomatic priority. For 3 days, there was no response. The Council waited in agony, watching their civilization crumble a little more each day. Then, finally, a reply came from Ambassador Linda Hayes. It was short, only 3 words. We will consider it. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the wide window of his ship looking out at the stars. He had been doing this job for 12 years now and he loved it. But today was different. Today everything would change. His communication device buzzed. It was the final confirmation from Earth. The message was short and clear. All humans were to leave Council space immediately. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just leave. Jake felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. He looked around the bridge of his ship, the horizon's end. His crew was busy preparing for departure. They all knew what was happening. They had all received the same orders. The Galactic Council had made their decision 3 weeks ago. Earth's ambassador, Linda Hayes, had stood before the entire Council and asked for one simple thing. She wanted Earth to have a real seat at the table. She wanted humans to have a voice in the decisions that affected everyone in the galaxy. The Council had said no. They said humans were too young, too inexperienced, too new to deserve such responsibility. They said humans needed more time to prove themselves worthy. Linda had returned to Earth quietly. She had not argued. She had not shouted. She had simply reported what happened to Earth's government, and then Earth made its own decision. Jake remembered the day humans first joined the Council's community. It was 30 years ago, before he was even born. Earth had been so excited to meet other intelligent species, to learn from them, to help build something bigger than themselves. And humans had helped. They had helped more than anyone realized. When the Krell and Vaxxan empires went to war, it was human negotiators who brought them to the peace table. When Station Unity collapsed after a terrorist attack, it was human engineers who rebuilt it. When pirates threatened the trade routes, it was human security teams who stopped them. Humans were everywhere. They fixed things. They solved problems. They worked hard and asked for little in return, but the Council never saw it that way. To them, humans were just workers. Useful, yes, but not important. Not worthy of real respect. Jake's second officer, a woman named Carrie Brooks, walked up beside him. She was young, only 25, but she was one of the best engineers Jake had ever worked with. "All personnel are aboard, Captain," she said. "We're ready to jump whenever you give the order." Jake nodded. He looked out at the massive space station below them. Station Kepler-7 was one of the largest human-built structures in Council space. Humans had spent 5 years building it. They had made it strong, efficient, and beautiful. Now they were leaving it behind. "What do you think will happen?" Carrie asked quietly. Jake did not answer right away. He watched as other human ships began to move. forming up for the journey home. There were dozens of them. Transport ships, cargo haulers, passenger vessels. Every human in council space was leaving today. I think they will figure it out eventually, Jake said. Carrie looked confused. Figure what out? What we really did here, Jake said. What we really meant to them. Down on Station Kepler 7, a Velon counselor named Thexlar was getting worried. He had sent 14 messages to the human workers on his station. None of them had responded. The humans were just packing up and leaving without explanation. Thexlar was angry. How dare they leave without permission? How dare they abandon their duties? He tried to access the station's main computer to send a formal complaint. But something was wrong. The system was not responding the way it should. It was slower than usual. Some commands were not working at all. Thexlar called for his own engineers. They would fix whatever the humans had broken before leaving. But up on the horizon's end, Jake knew better. The humans had not broken anything. Everything was still working perfectly. Every system was running exactly as it should for now. The problem was not what humans had done. The problem was what they would no longer be doing. Jake thought about all the small things humans did every day. The tiny adjustments they made to keep systems running smoothly. The little problems they fixed before anyone else even noticed them. The constant monitoring and maintenance that kept everything working perfectly. All of that was about to stop. Ambassador Linda Hayes had given very clear instructions to all human personnel. Leave everything operational. Do not sabotage anything. Do not damage anything. Just stop maintaining it. Let them see what happens when we are not there to fix things. Jake's communications officer spoke up. Captain, we are receiving multiple hails from council ships and stations. They want to know why we are leaving. Ignore them, Jake said calmly. Sir, some of these are marked as urgent. Ignore them all, Jake repeated. We have our orders. Radio silence. The officer nodded and turned back to his station. Jake watched as the last few human ships joined the formation. He saw the small shuttle carrying Danny Cole and his family. Danny had been the chief engineer for the Velon trade hub for 8 years. He had worked 16-hour days to keep their economy running smoothly. Now Danny was going home. Jake saw another ship carrying the medical staff from the Draxus orbital station. Those doctors and nurses had saved thousands of lives over the years. They had worked in conditions that would make most people quit. Now they were going home too. All across council space, the same thing was happening. Human teachers were leaving their schools. Human farmers were leaving their agricultural stations. Human technicians were leaving their workshops. Human diplomats were leaving their embassies quietly, efficiently. Without drama or anger, they simply left. Jake gave the order. All ships prepare for jump. Course set for Earth. The fleet began to move. One by one, the ships accelerated and disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Within minutes, the entire human presence in council space was gone. On Station Kepler 7, Thexlar finally noticed that the human ships had left. He tried to access the station's external cameras to see where they had gone. But the camera system was having problems. The image was fuzzy and kept cutting out. He called for his engineers again. They would need to fix that, and many other things too, though he did not know it yet. Back on the horizon's end, as Earth grew larger on the view screen, Carrie asked another question. Do you think they will apologize? Jake smiled sadly. Maybe, eventually, when they understand. And will we go back? That depends, Jake said, on whether they understand what they really lost. It was not just workers they lost. It was partners, friends, people who cared about making things better. The ship continued toward home, and behind them the Council's perfect civilization began its slow, invisible collapse. Nobody had fired a shot. Nobody had declared war. Nobody had made threats or demands. The humans had simply walked away. And sometimes that was the loudest statement of all.